All right, thank you everybody for joining. This is episode 3. I might sound like Karika, might not necessarily look like Karika. I am not Karika. My name is Jackie, and Karika and I work quite a lot together in the community. I, however, am a UiPath MVP, not necessarily Microsoft MVP. Hopefully one day that will change. But there's quite a lot that I do in quite a few different aspects, and the reason that I'm bringing that up is because you'll see in the presentation today, there's quite a few different things that I'm trying to focus on. So one of the things is how do we bring data governance, the educational side of things into this, as well as understanding why we would use this in a consulting and a business context as well. So as we said, we're going to be looking at how we build agents from scratch in the session. So I'm going to take it down low for those of you who might be a little bit bored or think that this is a bit novice. Don't worry, the more exciting stuff will probably come in a later session where we start playing with Foundry and we start doing some really hectic hardcore coding stuff, but that's not today's session. Today's session is really breaking down the basics of what we need to get an agent functional and kind of how we need to get this to work. So when we talk about agents, and I think it's an important conversation to have around why we talk about agents and not necessarily AI chatbots. The reason that we want to build agents is because we want agents to be able to work for us. We want them to be able to do things for us. But to do that, there's a few very core components that they need. And the first one is a knowledge base. So one of the things that we try to do is ensure that we give our agents the correct context, the correct knowledge to be able to perform whatever tasks they need to perform. Now, generally, when we're working with agents inside of Microsoft, we would want to use things like SharePoint, we'd want to use OneDrive, we want to use PDF files, we want to use public sources, so URLs of websites, those kinds of things. We want to use different kinds of files. We probably want to use SharePoint lists, which at the moment is still a tricky situation. We've actually got to export that to Excel first to get that to work. But there are ways around actually utilizing your data inside of the Microsoft landscape to get your Copilot agents to work. And I think that is one of the big reasons why people use Copilot instead of using the likes of custom agents inside of OpenAI's ChatGPT or inside of Gemini, or building Claude, or if you're fancy like L and you understand all the cool fancy tech behind it and you've got a Mac Mini lying around, setting up your own agents to talk to one another and being fancy like that. But for the most part, if your data already lives inside of Microsoft, a really good place to build an agent that would work for you would be inside Copilot. And there's quite a few different ways to do that, which we'll explore tonight as well. So now once we've got the knowledge sorted, we want to understand exactly what we want this agent to do. And that's when we start to look at the tools and the actions available to us. So in some cases, you might want to be able to send out an email. You might actually want to connect to an external service where we'd use things like APIs. And we want to interface with other technologies that we might have within our suite or within our ecosystem. We can also use tools like Power Automate. So if you've already got existing workflows and you kind of just want to put an agent on the front of that, you can do that too. There is some really cool use cases, or there are some really cool use cases where you can actually take a Power App and build an agent out of a Power App and literally enable it with the same functionality that you would have inside of the Canvas app. There are some bugs, and Tracy is on the call, so we're going to say nothing bad about Microsoft. There are bugs, and a lot of the stuff is in preview for a reason. Read between the lines, but it's not a bad tool for all intents and purposes. It's a really good concept. So when Microsoft finally gets it working, it's going to be a really great addition. Then the best part about building agents inside of the Microsoft landscape, I think, is most likely the fact that you can deploy it to so many channels. And this is going to be something we touch on in a bit, but really the ability to actually host this, inside of your Microsoft environments, plug it into Teams where it's quickly and easily accessible for anybody in your organization, popping it onto Telegram, WhatsApp, all the other channels that are available, really is a great use case. Now I'm going to quantify that a little bit. When I say that this can be deployed to WhatsApp, I don't mean that this is a really quick and easy way to get for the lack of a better word of saying it, a chatbot working inside of WhatsApp. It's never that simple. There are integrations that need to happen. You still need to go through the WhatsApp developer or the Meta developer portal. But for all intents and purposes, you can have your data living inside of the Microsoft landscape and communicate with that through an agent on WhatsApp once you've gotten through all the hoops and loopholes, all the different obstacles that you need to cross to get that working. Now, when we look at how this all comes together and we want to understand how these agents function, this is probably the most low down or the highest level, but lowest detail that I can give you to actually explain from a very high level how this works. So when you have a user who interacts with your agents through Teams or a web application or through Copilot itself, it actually references the Copilot or the agent that has been built. And for some people, that'll be inside of Copilot Studio. So this is the engine that makes everything work. There are different models that are empowered in this platform. These aren't the only two. There are a ton more. But essentially, there are models that make this agent come to life. And your Copilot Studio would essentially bring together your knowledge base and your tools and actions to perform the task that you want and provide that result back to the user. Now, there are more complicated things behind the scenes and under the hood. So there are things like topics that you need to set up. There are starter prompts. There are triggers of how you can kick off an agent. You can actually start an agent automatically. So you can prompt an agent to run automatically. So there is a lot more behind this, but this is really the basic architecture of how it all comes together when you're working with an agent inside of Microsoft. Now, as I said earlier, there are two different predominant offerings when we talk about Copilots inside of the Microsoft landscape. There's the M365 Copilot agent that you can build, and then there's the custom agent that you build. I think it's now referenced as Agent Builder inside of Copilot Studio. I think that's the new name, right, Elle? I think that's what we're going with this month.
If I can come off mute. Yeah, they talk about agent. Well, that's on the front end, the agent builder, agent that you build off the front end from the Copilot chat experience. You still need a license though.
You do need a license.
To consume that, well, to qualify that. You can build agents for people who don't have licenses. M365 Copilot licenses. You need a capacity license for that, a capacity pack license to 25,000 messages, $200. They have changed the way the pricing works, not from a dollar perspective, but how you actually license it inside of your tenant as of last week. In the old days, you had to have a pay-as-you-go subscription associated inside of your Azure subscription to activate the message capacity pack, and you'd be able to run over. That's no longer the case, which is great. But please read the fine print when you start buying message capacity licenses for building agents. Also, the agent builder has less functionality than Copilot Studio, but Jackie will take you through that now.
Thanks, Al. So what Al said, and also the disclaimer when we talk about licensing, it's a complicated mess. I tried to set up licensing on my own tenant earlier, and there was like 7,000 reasons why I couldn't. So I'm not the expert on the licensing side of things, but yeah, we do need a license for whatever we use when it comes to Copilot. Now, as we've now mentioned, and as Al had also alluded to, when we talk about Copilot, there is the agent builder in M365, and I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. But then we've also got Copilot Studio, which is where you build I want to say, the more heavyweight kind of stuff. So when we look at the comparisons between the two and who would use what, the M365 agents that we build would really be developed by business users. So everyday agent that you would be able to plug into things like your normal Copilot, into your M365 apps, so into your Office, into your Word, that cute little icon that's now popped up on all of your Microsoft products. If you open that up, I'll show you that later as well. You can actually select what agent you want to use if you're building it out inside of your M365 environment. When we look at Copilot Studio, that would be more for developers. It's when you want to do a lot more with your agent than what you would traditionally do with just the normal M365 agent. And when we talk about, what that heavyweight kind of functionality looks like, this is where we start to look at the knowledge sources that you want to connect. We start to understand, what the difference is when you start to understand the connectors that are available between the two. So for instance, when we look at M365, you really only have access to a few graph connectors, some of the pre-built M365 stuff. Whereas if you go to Copilot Studio, you can use a vast variety of custom connectors. You can build Power Automate flows and connect that to the agent. There's a lot more at your disposal when you go Copilot Studio than when you use just the normal M365 agent builder. So there is quite a bit of limited functionality when we build agents, and I'll show you the difference now. But that's essentially the big differences. And then when we look at the deployments as well, the M365 agent will be deployed specifically within your Copilot, your M365 Copilot only. It won't be, across different tools and technologies. Whereas when you look at Copilot Studio, you can deploy it into different channels and those kinds of things as well. So I'll show you some of the functionality, and we'll see some of the limitations around that. And it's important to understand this because I ran into this challenge as well where one of the organizations I was working with actually they had this need, so we developed it originally on M365, and then as the need started to explode and started to become more complicated, we realized we were actually using the wrong tech stack. So to avoid that from happening, it's important to understand what you want to do with the agent before you actually start developing. Okay, then when my presentation actually wants to change slides, there we go. There's different things that we need to consider, and this kind of leads on to what the do's and don'ts are with regards to agents and when we build them. If we're starting to look at the agents where we actually use topics, it's important to split your knowledge by topic. So you do want to create smaller instances of the knowledge that you're going to be working with. You're going to want to, look at specific responsibilities, the same way that you would look at a person. If you wanted to delegate work within a team, you'd want to identify exactly what components of that person's job they would be doing and what knowledge they need and what access they would need for different systems. You'd want to do the same with your agents. So it's important to kind of split that up, based on what the responsibility would be of that topic within the agent. One thing that has become really cool inside of the Copilot Studio side of things is that you can now evaluate your agents, and you can actually pass through some questions. And this helps you actually evaluate and do some test cases and, some really cool testing on your agent. I had a situation earlier where my agent was working perfectly fine until I started evaluating it, and then it went from there. It said no thanks. So I do have some concerns around the evaluation, but it is a really nice feature to make sure that, what you're testing your agent to do actually does work. And then something I think that is quite important, regardless of which technology stack you're using, it's cool to see, what the description is, what the instructions are. And I think a lot of the time developers kind of put that in there, even business users put that in there on a very casual basis. When you define the description or the instruction of your agent, you need to be precise. You need to be very mindful of what you're instructing the agent to do, because the description can sometimes have an impact on the quality of your response. It helps the agent actually stay on topic, and it tries to assist with some of the hallucinations as well. So as mediocre as a description seems, it is an important distinction to add in there as well. Then when you start to look at adding complex logic, this is also where the hallucinations plays quite a big part. Don't necessarily put your complex logic inside of the agents and expect the agent to manage that. Rather, offboard that onto a Power Automate flow, introduce that as a topic on its own, and bring that in as a subsection of your agent. The nice thing that has also come about in the last, I'd say, 2 years of development in the Copilot space, specifically talking about Copilot Studio, is you can now actually chain together agents. So you can have a diverse team of agents working together, and you can offboard tasks between them. I think that's really become a game changer in this space, because there are other platforms that are kind of cheaper and, in some ways perform better, but they don't have that ability to offboard tasks between them. So not only just looking at Power Automate, looking at agents as well, try to separate the logic out as needed. Then another thing that's really important, and I think this goes back to good practice from a development perspective as well, is making sure you set fallback behavior. So this is going to be what happens when you can't necessarily find the right answer, or when the agent isn't necessarily certain of what the correct answer might be or has low confidence. Being able to set up a fallback to make sure that the agent doesn't just keep quiet and it doesn't just become silent, that's a really important part of the flow. So those are some of the do's and things that you do want to build into your agents. From a don'ts perspective, you want to make sure that the data that you upload isn't necessarily unstructured noise. And what we mean by that is, if you have a PDF that has images in it, the images won't necessarily work as well as you think they do. If you want images to be read in a PDF, or images just in general, you're going to have to look at a more sophisticated solution inside of something like Foundry, where you can apply OCR, you can actually extract the information from the image. That's not necessarily something that is natively done by an agent. If you want to look at slide exports, if you want to look at raw HTML or files that aren't necessarily your typical data structure type, that's something that you want to potentially avoid. Yes, Al?
Copilot Studio and the word agents to do stuff like OCR, no.
Mm-hmm.
It's a no. Trust me, I've tried it.
I've also tried it. It's a
Currently,
big no.
it won't process it, even if you give it knowledge. Ergo, here's a library. I tried to build an agent to do that.
Yeah.
I spent money on Claude.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I did a custom agent inside of ChatGPT, so I understand.
Yeah, Rihanna?
I built an agent yesterday, just based off of a very small document set. And when I was asking Paul to test it, because I've sometimes got to really get a lot of buy-in for some of the things, he asked it a question which I thought, oh goodness, this is now going to just make him not like an agent anymore. So he asked a question which gave him words and obviously then links to documents and that kind of thing. And then he asked it to draw a flow diagram. And out of the words that were in there, it did that. And I was actually blown away by it. There were no diagrams in the document.
That
So
is a
very
nice surprise.
basic looking, but it was, you know, it was a proper flow chart. Very cool.
That is quite cool. I might try it because I haven't gone to that extent. I generally use a different AI to build a lot of my diagrams and stuff, but I definitely think that is worth a try. Thank you for sharing that, Rihanna.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, the kind of data that you upload will definitely, depict your ability to have a working agent and an agent that produces high confidence results. Then I think one of the things you also want to look at doing is don't necessarily skip the system prompt. So again, if you leave the agent description blank, you are going to have some hallucinations. You might end up in a very interesting situation with some of the questions that you ask. Don't use one topic for everything. So again, just as we would split people's roles into different divisions and we'd make sure that, certain things have certain responsibilities, certain people have certain responsibilities, just as we'd split out functions, we would do the same inside of an agent. So don't try group everything into one topic, because again, that's where you start to look at overloading your topic. It's where you start to introduce a lot of distraction and confusion between the kinds of prompts that you could introduce. So that is definitely something that you do need to be very cognizant of when you design an agent. Making sure that you don't ignore authentication is a massive one. This is particularly important for a few reasons. So the first one is when you try to use a web application as the channel that you're deploying to, one of the unfortunate situations is that you do need to switch off authentication to get it to work in a public web chat. But you've got to be very careful of the data that you're surfacing, because can you imagine now if you've got a document library with all employee contracts sitting somewhere, and I know Tracy and all of her little angels are having a complete heart attack just at the thought of this. But if this is all sitting in a document library, there's no authentication on this, there's no role-based access or user-based access on this, and you kind of make that public knowledge, you can imagine the public outcry, especially in a large enterprise where this information would very quickly become exploited. This is something you need to consider. So what information sits behind your agents? Who already has access to that through, for instance, your SharePoint authentication and authorization matrices? And what kind of authentication do we need to apply to the agent to make sure that this actually works? So I hate web chats, especially when we're working with Microsoft Copilot specifically, because if you are using your data that lives within a Microsoft setting, you don't want that exposed. So I try to avoid that as far as possible. When you do use an agent that is based off of SharePoint, you want to make sure that user actually authenticates and signs in so that the data that they have access to is the data that the agent will use to respond with. So for instance, if we do have this document library with all the HR data in it and all the contracts, I as Jackie should only be able to query Jackie's data and Jackie's contract and extract data from Jackie's contract. And I should only be able to ask questions around that. So there are certain elements of authentication that you do need to consider, and this also comes with your data strategy. So you need to also be very cognizant of what data you want to make available, what you want to use it for. Does your Power Automate flow also have access to this data if you are using Power Automate? There's a lot to consider when you start to touch very sensitive and confidential information. Then something you also don't want to do is forget republishing after changes. So if you make a change, make sure you republish, otherwise your changes aren't going to be live when you move over into the environment to test it. Now, when we build our first agent, we're going to go through these steps in Copilot Studio as well. I'll show you inside of M365. It's a lot easier, but just as a breakdown, this is pretty much your cheat sheet. We'll also make this available on the GitHub repo, but you'll open up Copilot Studio, you'll click on create new agents, you'll add your knowledge, you'll configure your topics, then you'll add your tools and actions. You'll test it in Canvas or evaluate. Depending on what kind of a person you are, if you actually follow a manual, you then test after you've added everything. I'm the kind of person who doesn't read a manual. That's my fiance's job. I click around until I break things or figure out what's going on, and then I end up evaluating an agent before I've actually built everything together. So depending on what kind of person you are, you'll possibly skip steps, but essentially testing should come after the add tools and actions. Then you publish to a channel, or sorry, you publish your agents, and then you deploy that to a channel. So that's the life cycle you should follow. If your agent is going to exclude certain things, like for instance, you're not going to add knowledge because you're just going to ask basic questions from data that's publicly available in models, then you obviously won't add knowledge. The knowledge literally is your context grounding. So it creates the barrier or the boundary around whatever your agent is supposed to be able to reference. And then your tools and actions would be if you want to actually have your agent do something on your behalf and not just give you information based on what you've provided. This is also a very lovely life cycle to follow if you aren't prompting your agent. Now, I am very humbled and very much surprised at the work that has been done inside of Copilot Studio with the prompting. So you can actually now create an agent from a prompt. It does add a lot more tools and technologies and actions and connectors than it should, which also makes me somewhat uncomfortable, because if you're a citizen developer and you don't necessarily understand what different connectors do, you could end up in some hot water. So I would suggest if you do prompt your agent to, or you prompt Copilot to create an agent, please just double check the connectors that it wants to set up. Make sure that you understand what the different actions are that it wants to execute. Don't just add, yes, no, okay, thanks, fine. All of that kind of stuff, because that could also be how you end up in a bit of hot water around what your agent actually has access to and what your agent is going to do. That was also a lesson that I learned yesterday. So when we talk about uploading knowledge, let's take SharePoint, for instance. If you're going to upload knowledge, this is essentially the brain that you're giving your agent. So you want to make sure that the knowledge that you give it is readable, it's usable, it's structured in some way, shape, or form. And when we say structured, we don't necessarily mean, you know, the traditional sense of having tables of data. You can use Word documents and PDF documents, again, provided the PDF documents aren't scanned images, because it doesn't work. The hallucinations are something incredible when you use scanned images. Public URLs you can also add. The one thing that I have also noticed is that the public URL only works as well as the site was developed. So if you have a site that was developed horribly, or WordPress is probably the best way I can put it, don't expect great results from the knowledge that you're going to be pulling from those public URLs. If there isn't a proper sitemap, or there isn't proper navigation through the site that an AI could, or pretty much an AI could reasonably scrape to understand and get the data that you're looking for, that is going to be a bit of a mess, and you are going to potentially receive some inaccurate results there. When we look at SharePoint files, again, internal wikis, company documents, Word files, Excel files, PDF documents, all that kind of stuff from SharePoint or OneDrive works. Excel and CSV tables work very, very well as well. One thing we have noticed, and I'm not sure if this has changed, I tried it probably about 2 months ago and it didn't work. If you try to connect a SharePoint list as the knowledge, it says no thanks. So what you should actually do is export that SharePoint list to an Excel, put that into a document library inside of SharePoint, and then reference that document library. It works quite well. If you do have a situation where your list data changes quite regularly, you might actually want to build a Power Automate flow that on a regular basis, on an automated occurrence, just goes and dumps that Excel file from that SharePoint list into an Excel file, and you can index it and reference it from there. I don't see my Teams chat, so if there are any questions, just stop me, please. Let me see if I can move that back. Okay. It's temporarily back. Let's see. Yeah, let's see if I change the slides. Okay. All right. So when we add tools, this is now where we start to get fancy inside of Copilot Studio. So if you want to send emails or schedule meetings or call an API or add a Power Automate flow, I'll show you how to do all of that inside of your agent. But what used to be referred to as a workflow inside of Power Automate is now a tool. So you actually connect it up as a tool, and you can create a workflow, and they now refer to it as an agent flow. And if I'm not mistaken, that utilizes different licensing. Again, that is like the world of the abyss, so we'll need a session on its own to discuss how that licensing works. But there's a lot more at your disposal when you create tools inside of your agents inside of Copilot Studio. Again, I'll show you what that looks like inside of M365. But that's essentially the long and short of it. And then when you publish, again, you can publish and deploy to different channels. So Microsoft Teams, Web Embed, Mobile, Custom Channel, all that kind of stuff is enabled. We'll show you some of those options in a bit. And then, yeah, then you've got everything you need. So again, this is just a tidbit. So I'll share this as well in the chat. The read the docs and the join the community is really cool. If you have any questions while you're developing, you can go through this, and it should be quite helpful for you. So while I switch screens and get the demo stuff running, do we have any questions before I move over to the playground?
I'll just say something anyway, Jax, while I'm buying you some time to
Thank you.
get all you look beautiful, by the way. I don't know what you're doing, but you look very lovely tonight.
Thanks. I have gym clothes on, so I appreciate it.
Well, apparently it suits you. I just want to remind everyone, and like I said, I don't know everyone on the call. I speak as fast as Jax does, okay? The two of us can, I don't know, like do a career in 3.5 weeks. But even, I mean, Jax is like family to me, and most of the people on the calls like family and friends to me. I love them dearly. But even in an environment like this, I still have imposter syndrome. You guys are throwing words around that I have no idea what it means, like honestly. And I'm glad that I sit on these calls because it socializes for me so that I don't get anxiety when I hear it and when other people use those words, okay? So it kind of like socializes for me because you really talk like unbelievably fancy things. But I want to remind everyone on the call, please don't ever be afraid to ask a question. I even said it to the cupcakes at the university today. I said that a lot of times if you have the courage to speak up and ask a question, even if you think it's stupid, it means that you must probably getting it answered for 10 other people who didn't have the courage to speak up. Okay, so just take that step and ask a question. If you do, there's no such things as stupid questions. It's the ones that's not asked that's stupid. So I just wanted to encourage everyone, Jax, that they shouldn't, because look, wow, even I feel like, whew, I'm in the shadow here with all, and Rihanna going, oh, I just built this simple little agent that I can ask to, I don't know. It's like, oi, okay. Luckily, I focus on the easy stuff, which is making people change their cultures and their habits. So thank goodness for that. But Jax, sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to remind everyone that we're all human and we're here to learn from it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Trace. I appreciate that. And yeah, as Trace said, I mean, there is literally no such thing as a stupid question. So please, if you have any questions, please pop them through. And if I'm using words you don't understand, please don't feel bad to stop me. I really don't mind explaining it, even if I have to explain it 7 times. I think something that techies tend to do is we forget that we use words, and if people don't understand, we don't necessarily think about that. So thanks for raising that, Trace. And also, Trace, you're the one who has the hard job because you actually have to get people to change their mind. That's never an easy thing to do. All right, so we've got Copilot open. Can you see my screen? Is it back?
Yes, I see Copilot. I
Okay,
see the
this is
free.
good.
I see the free tenant included Copilot.
Yes. Good. Because you
Yes.
can even do nice things on the free one. This is the
I
best
know.
part about it.
I know.
So we had this interesting conversation, probably about 6-7 months ago. Where are we now? June. Oh my goodness, we're already in June. So this would have been 9 months ago, where we had the conversation about what you can do in the free tenant versus what you need to do in the paid for tenant. And there was this really interesting use case that I've worked on with Crispy, where we managed to slip right between the licensing. So we'd created this really cool agent that we named Jessica in the trial environment, and then our trial expired and we ended up just moving over to the normal free version, and we could still use Jessica, and Jessica didn't hallucinate. It was lovely. There was this whole meme around Jessica and how she came to exist. So we've got March over here, but her new name is Michelle, because I saw a very similar video yesterday about Michelle and the Screaming Chicken. So what I did a while ago, and I'm showing you this in the M365 environment, we'll go through quite a bit of this. But what we actually did here is we created a market research agent. So if we edit this agent like this, let me just grab my prompt on the side here. What I did was I tried to create a market research agent that would allow me to take a look at a brand and put together pretty much just a marketing calendar with some suggested campaigns with some of our holidays that we had this year and what those holidays look like. So I gave it a bit of an instruction, and yes, I asked my AI to help me write an instruction for my AI. Don't judge, it's a thing, because only AI speak AI. So I did that, and as you can see here in M365, there's a lot of limitation. You can insert knowledge. You need a actual Copilot license for this, so it doesn't necessarily allow you to link to SharePoint unless you have the license. There's some capabilities that you can enable, but things like your tools and being able to add your Power Automate flows and that kind of stuff, like I mentioned, being able to set up your topics, that's not something you can do in M365. This is very, very lightweight. You can, however, add suggested prompts. So I've literally just popped in something simple here with list campaigns. It will ask me for some of the information that it needs to understand, who these campaigns are for, because if I don't say, this is the business, this is kind of the industry that I'm working in, it's going to come up with some interesting haberdashery. So what I've done is I've actually said to it, this is the structure that I want. So if I don't give it the structure, it will ask me for the structure. So let me just go back to the view where I can actually do nice things. Just go back. There we go. So what I do is we've got list campaigns down over here, or you can pop through the actual prompt or the message. And what will happen now is it'll actually say, okay, cool, there's the discovery header that it's now gotten. Here's your research dossier, so it'll tell you what the market context is. It'll tell you, more or less what the adoption drivers are. Some of this information, let's just ignore the hallucinations for a second. It was working perfectly fine earlier. But essentially, we look at some of the growth drivers, we look at some of the risks, we look at some of the regulations here. And this is important information because in market research, this will drive what your campaigns need to look like. So yeah, we've got quite a bit of market research. We've got some of the product lines. We've got understanding about the pricing models that scales from a normal small business all the way through to a big business. This business specifically is focused around NFC. So that's why you'll see a lot of NFC related stuff. Here's your competitor analysis. So essentially who would be playing around in the space as well. There's your matrix. Your share estimate would also be something that comes through. This is obviously all based on, public information. So if you had more data that is actually done by a research house, you can pop that into a SharePoint document library and pull that through to enhance your agent. But essentially what happens here is we get the campaign calendar. So it suggests some of the things that we can actually, promote as a campaign to the marketing for. So in January, back to business, it's a start smart theme in 2026. In February, it would have been sales acceleration, how you close more deals. March and April would have focused on financial year end. So how do you maximize your ROI before year end? May would be every own event. So making sure that you have an event season kind of prep. Youth Day, we'd look at on the 16th of June. So you'd want to look at the future of networking. You'd want to look at young entrepreneurs, how you can build new businesses. Then we've got Mandela Day. So we've got some purpose-driven business. And this kind of just aligns to whatever is happening in that month. So there's a really nice calendar. There's a 0 to 30-day quick win. There's a 31 to 60-day momentum. So you can look at webinar series. You can look at email campaigns, a lot of the stuff that actually takes time. So as you can see, building out a really nice prompt and popping it into M365, very basic. This is with a free tier. You can get some really, really good insights that you can use to build a marketing campaign. You can obviously improve this a lot, and you can chuck this into Copilot Studio, and you can actually, add on things like Power Automate, where you can go create schedules. You can, go create the content that you need to actually go create posts. There's a lot of additional stuff you can do here, but if you're literally just looking for some quick research, you have an agent that's already built in M365 to do that. So I've showed you what the agent compilation looks like. There are some templates that you can start with over here as well. Admittedly, some of these don't work as well as they should. So I've tried to plan my day. Some days it works, some days it doesn't. I do suspect it might be a license thing. So we can take a look at, what some of the stuff is meant to do and what access it has. The My Company Policy Agent is another one. Depending on how your company is set up, this will determine exactly how it will respond to you and what information it will write back. So this is M365. You can also share these agents across the organization. So when you publish this agent, you can say whether it's only for you, whether it's anybody in your organization, specific users, only you, and you can share it with people. And what will happen is when they actually go look for the agents, they can search it and it'll pop up, or you can send them a link and they'll be able to find it and pin it to their agents as well. The really cool thing about this, and I see Harvey has joined the call, so Harvey, close your eyes because I'm going to show people our nice hard work. But there's this article that myself, Harvey, and Yapi are working on at the moment, and I did say that there's this cool little button that we have here inside of Word, but you can actually select your agent from here. So the agent that we've now created and have been working on in our M365 suite, you can now actually pull through here and you can query it here and you can work with it here. And that's a really, really nice addition. So you can pull this throughout in Outlook, you can pull it through in Office, in any of your Office products. And I think that's something that is really awesome. That's something that is a lot harder to set up when you work with the Copilot Studio agent. So I'm going to pause there for a second and ask if you have any questions before I go over to the hardcore Copilot Studio side of things, where we start to build a lot more into our agents. And Al and Trace, if you guys have anything to add here, you're more than welcome to hop in.
I do have a couple of comments, and I haven't personally looked at the inherent problem with Microsoft is all of this changes tomorrow. So I did some stuff. Did not have create agent button in the top right hand corner. They've also relaunched the new chat. Well, they've changed the chat experience. So if you click on new chat, Jax. No, yeah, that one. Notice it's a much cleaner user experience. Now, from an agent perspective, if you go back to Agent Builder. Yeah. So, okay, go back to where it said create agent. So you in the tab on the top right hand corner that said create agent. What was that? There, that one. All right. So if you go to all agents, they're making the ability to create agents everywhere. Now, typically, if you look at agent builder agents, the fact that you can start sharing agents that you build, the me agent, right, with other users is quite interesting, because when you look at I wouldn't call it data governance, but the security guardrails that you would want to pull across. I don't know if I would want to build organizational agents from this create agent button, the agent builder experience. I suppose if you're building it and you want to share it between 2 or 3 people, and I don't know, it's very difficult to draw a line in the traditional way that we would approach building applications inside of an organization, because you're building an application. As much as you go, it's just a retrieval agent fetching data from we built an agent to analyze 150 people's last year's salary increases inside of the organization. So you're building an HR salary review agent because it's salary review time, and you want to do the comparisons and things like that. That scares me to the nth degree, because if someone in finance or someone in HR has access to a library that's got the salary reviews for the last year, because everyone gets they'll get an increase letter and all of those things, and starts doing it that way, and someone's building that, no, a very different world. So be careful what you build here in Agent Builder when you start wanting to give other people access to it. Yes, security guardrails that live inside of Microsoft 365. So if you build an HR agent looking at knowledge inside of an HR document library that the person doesn't have access to, they'll see the agent, but they won't have access to the content, because any agent you build adheres to security trimming inside of Microsoft 365. I don't have anything else to add to this specific thing. I see Rihanna's hand is up. Pick me, pick me.
Pick me. If I use so recently I read Jack. I don't want to say surname because I'm going to completely bastardize the thing. So he built 9 or 10 new templates in agents in through Copilot this way. And I don't have an option to be able to share those. So I played around with them. It's nice and simple. You can go and add knowledge if you want to, but the basic agents that he built, you don't even have to do that. There's one called the SME agent. You just say create, and it's only for you. I don't have the ability, and I don't know if that's something that's switched off on our side, but on that one, I'm not able to share it. It doesn't give me the option. It's my agent. So I don't know. I haven't built agents through this side though.
Yeah. Is this a new tenant, an old tenant that you're in? Is it enrolled in Frontier Features? Is it enrolled for targeted release?
No, this is an old tenant, not enrolled for any of that stuff. But I have another tenant here that I'm going to play with on the side, which has the Copilot Studio working, which is I think this one's enabled because the look and feel on that versus my new tenants and this tenant. So I've got a few tenants. I've got this tenant, which is an old tenant. I've got a brand new tenant that has a very similar look and feel to this, not enrolled in anything either. And then I've got an old tenant that I'm going to show Copilot Studio on, which looks completely different. I don't know what that's enrolled in. I don't have those permissions. I'm just a
the
peasant
sharing
on
one.
that
I've not seen where you went and you said share with people. That was new, not unexpected. So I didn't react. Oh my word! But that I haven't seen that. I'm going to test it now.
Yeah. Give me a second because the species that Tracy hates is Barfield. So let me just post it real quick.
Why does my name get dragged into stuff constantly?
Because you're the one who hates the Vorty memes. You give me nonsense about it all the time.
Just say that again. Hate the what?
You hate the species, the Vorty breed.
Oh, your dogs.
Yes,
your dogs. Okay, that's correct. I do hate them. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, Jax. I love you enough to love them, but that's as far as it's gonna go.
My create agent button is in a different place.
Yeah.
Although I suspect it's because I'm on an earlier ring.
Yeah, it could be.
Because they've updated the chat experience, and they're doing the same thing for the agentic experience. So your chat experience is super clean, monochromatic. And as always, Matthew Cox has some questions.
And they're good questions. When you give an agent knowledge, say a web page you're on, for example, will it use that specific? Okay, so
hold on. Someone's asked, HP's saying something.
Yeah, HP's saying some really cool things. So
I like the
yes. So the good
what is he asking?
No, he's saying there's a good test. So he says there the test that you can run for an agent is, would I be comfortable publishing this in a book? If the answer is yes, then share it. If the answer is no, then keep it private. It's a good way to approach agents. That's some really good advice. And then the academic world advances because people share ideas, frameworks, methods, and insights. Many of the most influential scholars built their reputations not by protecting every idea, but by making their thinking accessible and allowing others to build on it. Thinking about it logically should probably be what should I share and in what form, as one cannot give that with a closed hand. I agree with this, and it's mostly because Hobby and I think we're at a conference not so long ago where I had my thinking challenged at that conference
Jax,
about what do you actually share.
quick question. Are you done with showing your stuff for the agent things? Because
Only for one of the agents.
we're going down a rabbit hole here
Yes.
where we're going to have questions around that. Do you want to finish your train of thought around?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back. There's some interesting questions in the chat. I do want to come back to it because it's in the data governance world, which is where I live, and also HP's topics around the one around scholars sharing their reputations. And I've got a story about working today, first time experience with an actual frontier firm, and it was bizarre, and I want to share that with everyone here. So continue with your demo because we're going to get largely distracted.
Okay. Let me get that great. I may have lost it. Here we go. Okay. So there's a few things I want to show you now from Copilot Studio that looks different. So we've now gone through the M365 version. Now we're going through the Copilot Studio version, and there's so much I want to show you. I don't know where to start. So first things first, we looked at what the editing or the configuration of an agent looked like in M365. Let's look at the configuration inside of Copilot Studio, then we'll go set up a nice agent and I'll show you all those fancy things and we'll add knowledge and so on. So remember I said I'm that person who doesn't read an instruction and that's my fiance's job. It's partly because this bloody button, this review button over here is a problem because I've literally just set it up and it's telling me to test. So I like clicking things that have different colors and then I end up evaluating a bot or an agent that doesn't exist yet. So what you get to do when you have a license is you can select the model. So remember I said there's quite a few models available here, and depending on what you're going to be doing with your model, you can select what model you're going to be using and kind of what works with what. One thing I do just want to emphasize, because I still see a lot of developers doing this now. If it says preview, please don't put it into production. Because if something goes wrong or Microsoft or one of the main third parties that are the reason that this is a preview decides to pull out, then your agent is going to fall flat and it's going to be detrimental. So whenever you see preview, use it, test it, play with it, but don't put it into production until it's out of preview. Instructions, you'll see there's quite a bit of an instruction set here. Again, I use AI to help me write instructions. I don't have knowledge for this agent. I did prompt this agent to be created. So I said to my prompt for this agent was, please can you create an agent that goes and checks my availability in my calendar and then returns my slots. And then if there is a session that needs to be sent or set up, please ask for the details and set that up. It proceeded to ask me for a list of things to be added, which as you can see here, I added all of them, but I want to show you here, get list views is not a thing. So this should be something that I deleted. It's important to check this before you actually just say, yeah, add them all, I don't really care, because you can end up in some hot water here, especially when we start to look at the MCPs that get added, the model context protocols. If it looks scary, think twice about doing it. Here, the IQ, the work IQ models that have come through for users, for calendar, for Outlook, they're really cool. They have a lot of capability, but it's interesting because the documentation around what it actually enables is still lacking a little bit. So just take a look at what you want to do. Make sure that the work IQ stuff that's suggested here with a tool when you prompt the agent is exactly what you want to do. If it isn't, remove it. Your agent will very quickly tell you when that's lacking access to one of the connectors that you can just manually go add. So if you add a tool over here, you can literally just go manually add it back. We were talking earlier about if you want to offboard some of the stuff to Power Automate, you can do that. So here's the workflows. So if you create a new workflow over here, it'll prompt you. This is the agent flows that it creates. So you can actually say when an agent is called, you can add some really cool functionality in here. So if you want to set up some stuff, if you want to do some Power BI automation, go refresh your data set, go export to PDF and reference that, you can do all of that there. I've managed to just exit my agent, so give me a second to get back. Okay, so that's your tools. Triggers is a really cool thing that you can do to actually activate your agent to run. So what this means is you can have an autonomous agent. You can set up your agent to run daily at 9 o'clock in the morning. So where we would have a coffee before we actually go get the information that we want and then send it to a team or whatever we do with it, you can actually get an agent to do that automatically. Agents, so if you already have one agent and you kind of want to offboard your input and output from one agent to another, you can do that by connecting agents over here. So you can add an existing agent. And then topics. Topics is important. If you have additional topics that you want to add, so for instance, this is just a normal calendar availability, so it's going to have a greeting. I can and I should add a topic here to say check availability. I should have another topic to actually set up the session. If I want to check the availability of another user, I should have another topic for all of that. If there's more information that I want to add in, more functionality, I should either consider adding another agent or adding another topic. Then we've got the activity. So once our agent runs, we'll be able to see what the activity is. We'll be able to see how many steps there were. We can actually interrogate this flow. So we can see here what the output was. There you go. You can actually go through, click on you can see the prompts, you can see what the inputs and outputs were. So this is really nice from a test perspective to see what information is coming through. This is a really nice interface to actually understand what your agent is doing. This is something that separates Microsoft apart from a lot of your other vendors in this space. You don't necessarily have the flexibility, the visibility, and the traceability of what your agent does and what the inner workings of your agent looks like you can with Copilot. Then the evaluation, I'm not going to run this yet because demo demons, and if this thing falls apart because evaluation, I'm not going to be a friendly person. So I'm going to leave those for now. Let's test it first. I can show you that it works and then we can go break it. So let's ask here, give me my, let's see, for tomorrow. So it goes and runs through all of these beautiful things. As you can see, the work IQ calendar added twice. So now what we're doing is we're using additional messages, and this now starts to touch on licensing and all of that kind of stuff, which is unnecessary. So the way that you connect up connectors and what you actually give access to your agents is important because it could have a material impact financially on what you're going to actually be doing with your agents. So you'll see the situation is now thinking and it's giving me data. Now it's actually got to turn this into a response. It's thinking hard. Okay, cool. So it's telling me what I'm doing tomorrow. I've got 2 big sessions, and it's giving me my availability. So I've got a block from 8 to 9, from 10 to 11, and from 4:30 to 5. If I wanted to add a meeting or schedule a meeting, I can say, please add the meeting. I can give it details. I can say who to invite. And I know that this is going to fail because I didn't give it access to actually create the calendar event. So if I say to it now, schedule a session, if I can spell any session, again, spell 16:30 tomorrow, title, space. It's going to come back and say, you didn't give me nice things, so go do it yourself. You're not my real boss. That's the response we're expecting. So let's just check. Yep. You're not my real boss, unable to do this. Do it yourself. There's the steps to go do it yourself. Go talk to your IT admin, go add nice things. So as you can see, your agent will tell you exactly what you need to do if it doesn't have the access that you need, which is quite cool. And now we can go break it by actually going to evaluate this. So we can evaluate the agent, which is new. This is coming recently where you can actually get test cases. So what it'll do is try connect. It'll give me test cases. If I don't go set up my own, I can go set up my own, but it's now generated some for me. Now I run this and it's going to take a hot second. So while it evaluates and I don't waste your time, I want to go to an agent quick that we're going to build ourselves. Here's where you prompt your agent, by the way. So this calendar availability agent I prompted here. There are also some templates here. They don't work as well as they should in some aspects. So you can go play around with them. But what I do want to do is I want to show you how to create one from scratch real quick with knowledge. So what we've done is we've created some information here around sessions that we have for Power Platform specifically. So we've got week 1 until 9. We've got the lecture that is in Power PowerPoint. We've got the instructor notes, which is in a Word document. There are some images in the PPTX, in the PowerPoint presentation files, but all of that is explained in the instructor notes. So we'll be leveraging that essentially to create our agent. So what we'll do is we'll create a blank agent. We'll call it a study buddy. Again, for spelling, create that. And then what we can do here, let me just grab my prompt again, that my handy AI helped me write. This prompt is literally just saying you are a study buddy. You're going to reference data that already lives in SharePoint, and you're going to give the user answers about Power Platform. Then I'm going to save this. It's going to take a second to spin up. So let's just give it a description as well. You can do fancy things like change the icons and all of that kind of stuff. It's still just setting up. While it sets up, I haven't done this before. Let's see if we break anything. Let's add knowledge. So there are quite a few places that you can actually add knowledge from. I'm just going to browse directly to our document library. There we go. I'm going to confirm the selection. This is the library that contains all of those files. And I'm quickly going to answer one of Matthew's questions. So if you use something like Wikipedia, you can't give it an actual descriptive root. So you can't have more than, I think, 2 forward slashes in the root. You have to take pretty much the root of the file, of the site. So you've got to take the base, the home URL essentially. And then it goes and scrapes all the information that it needs from there. Okay, so we've added our training data from SharePoint. That data is ready. What we do want to do as well is we want to actually go add our description, save that. And then we want to hit refresh and see what happens. It might break, it might not. Let's see. Okay, so essentially what we've done now is we've created an agent literally just connected to knowledge. We've literally just grounded our agent in knowledge. We haven't added tools. We aren't adding triggers. We aren't adding additional agents. All we're going to do now is we're going to say, can you tell me what a power is? It'll go search our knowledge that we have inside of SharePoint, and it will give us our information back. So if we had to store our HR data here, essentially, we'd be able to query that. If we wanted to store financial data here, which I would not suggest doing, you can do that here. If you wanted to store company policies, you could essentially create that from here. What you can also do is you can enable searches through the web so that it doesn't just use your knowledge that is founded in the SharePoint references, and it will essentially give you the answers from that as well. So here we can see what the reference sources are. A lot of this is referencing our instructor notes and our lecture notes. And generally what happens is it actually tells you where this content comes from as well. So week 6 and week 1 is what was used to actually give this answer. And if you click on this over here, it'll actually open up the presentation and the lecture notes. Just give it a second. Okay, there we go. So it's opened it up and it said, okay, cool, this is a Power App. This is how it works. Why would you use Power Apps? So it gives the reference, which is clickable, and it downloads directly from SharePoint as well. So you can see why this is dangerous, because if you're asking a question and it pulls up somebody's contract, for instance, and you open up the contract and you can see somebody else's contract, that could be something that is quite detrimental. So yeah, that's how you found your agent in knowledge. I've showed you now what you can do from a perspective of, having a lot of other stuff connected as well. And my personal favorite about the evaluation summary is that I have yet to build an agent that has scored more than 50% on this evaluation. So for anybody who's gotten it above 50%, please share your secrets, because I need to know. It makes me feel like a failure. But the nice thing is here, it actually shows you what the test cases are that came through, what the answer was, whether it seemed relevant or whether it was incomplete. There are quite a few hallucinations that I have picked up from the different models, so you do just need to play around with the model and see what you can get. Rihanna, I see your hand is up. Please tell me you've gotten more than 50%.
I've got 100% on one, but the rest of them sit between 70 and 80%.
Oh,
and
that's
I
nice.
am I having like sleepless nights over the 70s and 80s? Because I went away for a couple of weeks and then came back and realized that you can evaluate the damn thing. And you didn't have to do that before. They were perfect before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what to go and change to make them 100%.
So the interesting part about what would change is the moderation. So depending on what your moderation setting is on your knowledge, let me just show you quick, that might have a difference. So if you set your content moderation, that might have an impact. If you give potential answers, that might have an impact. If you add prompts, if you add user feedback, if you enhance the settings, that might also have an impact.
Okay.
So it would be interesting to play around with that and see if you can get anything around that. If you do manage to get, those results up, please do let us know, because like I said, my test cases don't get past 50%.
Okay. I think yours may be a little bit more complex than mine, but I will let you know if I find any great gems.
Thank you. Then that is my story. You're welcome to flood us with questions now. I'm happy to answer. I don't know, Al, if you want